You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Break Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Garden. So how does a working mother of four go from climbing the ladder to executive vice president of one of the largest real estate companies in the most competitive market in the world, New York City, go to saying, whoa, hey, I need a break, and then going on to founding a venture-backed corporate wellness company? I'll give you a hint. It's by tapping into a burning problem that she finally realized she had a unique advantage to create. Patrice Meagher founded MilkMate, a unique workplace service that solves the problem young mothers face when needing to breast pump at work. She's a mother of four who deeply felt this problem and was uniquely positioned to solve it. She just needed to figure out how. Ultimately, instead of accepting the status quo, she decided to be a catalyst for change, and thank God she did. Because she was entrenched in a 15-year career in the corporate world. She could have packed it in and lived the good life, but she forged ahead, driven by the purpose of empowering working mothers in the workplace. Patrice's journey is one of resilience, innovation, and unwavering dedication to the well-being of working mothers everywhere. Her creation, MilkMate, is a testament to her commitment to positive change in the workplace. So stay tuned, folks. In our upcoming conversation with Patrice, we'll delve deeper into her journey, the incredible work of MilkMate, and the impact it's making on lives of working mothers and their employees. You won't want to miss this inspiring discussion with Patrice Meagher. This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Patrice, welcome to The Break. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I had a great time in the last 5 minutes, just kind of catching up with you and deciding what we were going to talk about. Yeah. And I think we have a lot of similarities, which is super cool. So I appreciate you giving us your time.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here.
As I mentioned to you, The Break is all about these moments in our lives and the process by which we break ourselves to do something different, break our own constraints, break our paths, and how that all works. And so your story kind of, got to me, and I wanted to talk to you because you've made a couple of different evolutions. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go from kind of like a communications and film studies major to a real estate executive who really did well for herself and found success of what we would normally call success, to then, kind of medical devices, completely creating a brand new category as an entrepreneur. And so we're going to get through that whole progression. You start out kind of your young adult life in college, and you are a communications and film studies minor, I guess, film studies minor. Talk to us about your decision process at that point in your life. And what was it about film studies and communication that got you rolling in that direction?
I went to Boston College, and I originally, talking about changing things, had applied to their School of Education. I thought I had had some really awesome teachers in my life, so I thought I wanted to be a teacher. When I got to school and I started in my classes, I realized just because I liked my teachers, it wouldn't necessarily make me a good teacher. And so I sort of started looking to other things that I was good at. I had always been like a waitress and sort of a salesperson. And so I liked the idea of communications and marketing. And I was a big movie person. And I kind of thought maybe the idea of being like a reporter or someone on TV would be interesting, which is how I got into it, which is really like, I think my sales bug getting to me. And so that's how I ended up there. And then I graduated college in 2001, which, as you can imagine, was a very interesting time to graduate college because I wanted to move to New York. And I was from Philadelphia, so I was back home in Philadelphia, and I was like all ready to move to New York and try to figure out the film industry or communications or marketing. And My parents were like, that's great. Go, good luck with that. But at that time, moving to New York was not really an option for me because it's super expensive. And so I basically had to go back to the drawing board and figure out a job in Philadelphia. My parents said, you can live with us, but we're not giving you any more money to move to New York or anything. And then September 11th happened,
Right.
which was pretty obviously earth-shattering for everyone. But it was sort of an interesting time to graduate college and be on the job search because, we were raised in a time where like the sky was the limit, right? In terms of that's how I was at BC. It was like sort of like you can do anything. I also went to an all-girl high school that was big proponents for women and gave me a lot of confidence. And then September 11th happened and, everything changed and the job market became, a very, very difficult place for most people to be. And obviously there was a lot more struggles that people were going through aside from that, but it kind of, it forced us to get out there and sort of analyze a little bit more about, at that age, what we would be good at or what, I remember at the time, my brother-in-law saying to me, like, why do you want to do film and communications? Because you like it, but what are you good at? Right. And so my dad at the time said, you should just make it your full-time job to find a job and talk to as many people as you can that have been successful professionals, men and women, and get advice from them. And every time you meet with someone, ask them to meet with 3 more people. And it became like a networking sort of domino effect. And I was introduced to someone in the nonprofit industry who actually worked for the Philadelphia Orchestra, ran fundraising events for them. And someone else at the time had said, oh, this is a really good career for women. And why? Just because women are in nonprofit and fundraising at the time, it's 2001. And so I went to meet with this person and they said, actually, someone was supposed to start in a job today. They didn't show up. Would you like to interview for it? And I was like, okay. And so basically I started interviewing to do fundraising. And what is fundraising is sales and networking. And that's what I was good at. And so that's where I got my first job out of school. And so, yeah, that's where I started my path in nonprofit, which is kind of funny. So
I was going to ask kind of about like what your guidance systems were at this time, right? And you alluded to them. You had, some advice from your father and your parents and an uncle, I think you mentioned.
Yeah.
How would you characterize your guidance systems? Because I heard the word success in there, right? Like go meet with successful people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And find out how they became successful. And a lot of times that is somebody else's idea of success or that. And so I'm just curious as to how that hit you at the time and maybe what you learned about trying to meet with quote unquote successful people.
No, totally. Yeah, I know. So it's funny when I actually went home and told my dad that because he was probably the biggest influence on me as it pertained to my job stuff. I said, I got this offer in nonprofit and my dad was in commercial real estate, which was not nonprofit. It's all about profit. Right. And so he was like, what? Like, and, to him, in fairness to him, he worked his way up to being a, very successful, well-known businessman, but also, had made all of his own money himself. And so to him, success was tied to money a lot. Right. And so it, that was his feeling around that. I mean, obviously success was tied to other people that, were clearly successful in their business and whatever they were doing. But at the time, he didn't really know how to react to like a nonprofit job. So he sent me to talk to this man named Bill Rouse, who, if you Google Bill Rouse, was one of the most famous developers in Philadelphia's history, because he changed the skyline of Philadelphia. For a very long time, you weren't allowed to build above a certain area, and he got it so that you could. So a lot more development came, and he was also very involved in nonprofits in Philadelphia. And my dad said, I don't know anything about nonprofits. Go talk to Bill Rouse. So I went to meet with him, and he said, you should take this job in nonprofit because nonprofits are a crucial into making cities tick, right? It's really important to have higher education. It's really important to have arts. And so he said, if you go to work at the Philadelphia Orchestra, you're going to understand the way that the city of Philadelphia works. And you're also going to meet the most powerful people in the city of Philadelphia because they're all on the board of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And then if you decide you don't want to be in nonprofit or fundraising, you're going to have met all of these people in many different industries, from legal to real estate to banking to and many other fields. And then it'll help you with your network to decide what you want to do next. And he was 100% right. I learned a lot about Philadelphia. I met a ton of people. And it was a great first job to have.
Yeah, interesting. There's this idea of like, I hear your uncle saying, what do you like, right? Okay, you like film, but what are you good at? And as an 18 to 22-year-old, like, how do you really know that?
I know.
And then the advice comes in from a really wealthy, successful person who's taking the track of like, okay, it's not necessarily about what you're good at or exactly what you know you want to do, but it's about where can this get you? Like what stepping stone is it? And I think that's really interesting from a advice standpoint for a person of that age.
Totally. I think the difference between like advice that you give a 22-year-old and advice that you even give like a 28-year-old is very different, right? Because when you graduate college, you need to first of all, you need to become like it doesn't matter what you do, whether you're a teacher or a nurse, you have to sort of learn what it's like to be in the workforce, right? And like what that means from like a cadence perspective, like getting up in the morning, dressing yourself appropriately and, emailing with people the right way. And then you have to, at the same time, learn the language of whatever job you're doing. And then you have to decide if you're good at it, or you have to find out if you're good at it, and if you like it too. So it's all of this. It's like such an evolution to get to, I think to get to your second job even, right? Because that first job is really just like teaching you about work in general, right? And so, I thought it was good at, the advice that I got from Bill Rouse, what the developer that I told you about was really, I look back to that advice all the time. So it's like, how do you learn from, when you look back at what you're doing on a daily basis, it's hard to understand what you're learning. But then when you look back at the days over time, it's like, okay, this is how I got to where I am and sort of this and making decisions on the next step, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's this idea that you like can't connect the dots. You can only connect the dots looking backward. And so to connect dots in the future, you have to have some faith.
Yes.
That they're going to connect or that you're going to get to where you are. You can't like just know that in advance.
Totally.
And I think Bill's advice was like, okay, yeah, you might not know, but look at, I guess, how we call like the luck surface area that you could create here by being and knowing everybody in the city.
Totally.
Which is a totally different way of thinking about it. Like, we tend to think about linear progression, right?
Yeah.
In career. And he's the person that's like really wealthy, really successful and going like, well, it's not about making the one right decision. It's about what options you create for yourself.
Correct.
From this one, which is cool.
Yeah. And I think that was like, if you look back at my dad and my uncle and Bill Rouse and whoever, it was all sort of the same in a way. Cause it was like, okay, get out there and, learn from other people's like experiences really in terms of how to get to the next step. And, that's like, for me, like when you talk about listening to podcasts, like I love listening to podcasts from founders who stumble the whole way, because I'm like, who like actually doesn't stumble, right? Because then I'm like, okay, let me learn from their experiences. And so I feel like that's my advice always for even young people now that come to seek career advice from me is like, just talk to as many people as you can. And then I redid that when I got into the MilkMate, which we can talk about later, but I stopped doing that for a long time. And I was like, I was pleasantly surprised by all of the generosity of people's time and information and experience too.
Yeah. And I want to get into MilkMate. I'm just a stickler for like follow-up questions.
Me too. Yeah.
I always have a bunch. This idea that, so you mentioned this idea that like, when you were graduating from BC, it's sort of like you could do anything mentality kind of until the 9/11. And it's interesting to me because people that I talk to, we sort of have this issue where it's absolutely correct. Like you can do anything, but then the choosing of where you invest your time and resources to acquire which skills and hard skills and all of that kind of stuff is like the really, really big, hairy problem for a lot of people.
Totally.
That's why I'm really kind of sticking on this whole like stepping stone idea, because I
Totally.
think people don't think this way. They think I have to, again, it's that linear mindset of like, okay, what do I have to do? What are the skills that I have to acquire? But it's sort of like, no, how do you filter out all of the possibilities that you're not well suited for? And then how do you expand opportunities within that realm? It's kind of this, like, I call it like this divergent, convergent type thinking that you go through with a lot of design people. I'm curious as to how you thought of that issue when you were going through it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was like kind of mad that I couldn't move to New York. So I was definitely driven by the idea that I wanted to move out of my parents' house, right? I wanted to get a job so I could start saving money so that I could move to New York. And I also, I was driven to get in front of as many people as possible to figure out, what their advice would be around what I should do. And I definitely like asked for a lot of advice around it too. I think that I'm definitely like a coachable person. Like, I think that like I'm good at to-do lists or execution. And so like when I see how something gets done, then it usually helps me to make the decision around it. And so I think the idea that a lot of people were giving me advice on the whole process, and I took all of that advice to heart. I really did. And sometimes almost to a fault, right? Because like you end up having to make your own decision about things. You have to get focused on what you want to do. But in the beginning, that was important to me to get as much advice as possible. And I also got advice from someone that said, there's two important decisions you make in your career, whether you want to go to a big company or a small company, or if you want to make money or you don't want to make money. And everyone who, it's hard to answer the first question because you don't know if you want to work at a big company or a small company. So you have to just try and see. Or big organization is what I mean versus a small organization. And when you ask people whether or not they want to make money, every single person says yes.
Right.
Of course. But there's this idea around, being driven by like motivations around money, and then being driven around motivations around mission too. And there's nothing wrong with either. Sometimes it's a version of both. But I think that, looking at it from that perspective is helped. Well, it helped me later on to make some decisions about it. In the beginning, it didn't help me as much, but just networking and learning from other people's experience was, I think it's important to take advice at that point in time because it's really hard to know. I think it's like, I hate when even when I run into kids that are graduating college right now and I say, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm so sorry I asked you that question because it's like so hard to know what you're going to do. Do you know what I mean? And I think just, it's a trial and error. It really is, right? It's like, I know plenty of people that have taken first jobs out of school and ended up in completely different locations. And sometimes I think you just have to jump in and experience yourself.
I think that's the norm rather than the exception now, definitely. But what I want to do is shorten people's time window to figuring that out. So one of the questions I always ask people that I coach and mentor, when they say like, when they come up with this, like, what is their sort of identity and what path have they been on since college? And I just sit there and I ask, like, do you think it's fair that an 18-year-old version of you should be like tasked and have the responsibility with picking your life direction for the rest of your life?
Totally.
No. So of course you can change that. Of course you can change it.
Yeah. You're gonna change it. I mean, right? What percentage of it doesn't change it, right?
And so let's do it on purpose before something bad happens.
I do think like there is a rip the Band-Aid theme with my whole career. And the way that it evolved from graduating college to going to nonprofit to going to commercial real estate to moving to New York to doing MilkMate. And sometimes ripping that Band-Aid took longer and took more like discussions with people. But once I ripped the Band-Aid and jumped into whatever it was I was doing, I was able to sort of read the situation and decide whether or not it was the right thing for me to do. And every single time I made the next rip the Band-Aid decision, I was more informed, right? I had experience. I had more understanding of what I could do and what I was good at. And so I think, and my husband would laugh if he's on here because he's like, you're not a great rip the Band-Aid person. So it's funny they were giving that advice. But in the beginning, I ripped the Band-Aid because I just wanted to get going, right. I wanted to move out of my parents' house. I wanted to move to New York. I wanted to get in the workforce. I wanted to do all of that kind of stuff. So it was a little easier just to jump into something.
Yeah. So you got going. What was the next Band-Aid you had to rip off then? And what's the next transition period here?
So I spent a few years working at the Philadelphia Orchestra. Right. Amazing. Living downtown in Philadelphia. And then I wanted to make more money, frankly. Right. Mm-hmm. And I was living really paycheck to paycheck at that point, it's definitely you could have a whole discussion around this in nonprofit world. It's like you have all of this amazing talent and amazing people. And sometimes it's just that they can't afford to pay for talent. Right. And so ended up wanting to just explore options where I could make more money. Right. And I still had my eye on moving to New York at that point. And so it was very natural for me to talk to people in commercial real estate because my father was in commercial real estate and a lot of my family members were. And so I started that journey again of going out and just meeting a lot of people. And that's how I ended up ripping the Band-Aid and getting into the ownership side of commercial real estate. And I did not go to work with my father or my brother who worked together. I went with a different firm just based on where I was in my career. I thought it would be easier for me to learn from people that I was not related to at the time. So it ended up being the right decision, I think, for everyone. So I went to work for an owner in Philadelphia, about 3 years into my career path.
And doing exactly what? How did you start in that new field? Obviously you had some connections that helped you probably get into that. You knew people in the city because of the time you spent with the orchestra and the nonprofit. But what was that transition period like? And how did that go?
So the transition was, I had work experience, right? So I understood the showing up on time and managing up people, because at that age you have to do that a lot. And I had sales experience because I, was forced to talk to a lot of people and network. And, but I did not have commercial real estate language experience or technical experience. And so it was not so hard to get into the everyday flow of it and understanding how to do a to-do list or to plan my day, but learning actually commercial real estate and how to navigate a lease or a term sheet or any of the things that go along from a technical standpoint, like HVAC and square footage and many other things that probably aren't making sense to people that I'm talking to right now. That was a learning curve. I had to learn all of that all over again. And so that was hard because, commercial real estate is a very competitive industry because it's a really high cost for employers, right? It's their second highest cost typically. Usually their first highest cost is their employees. And so there's a lot of negotiation that goes into it. And so it's very competitive. And, so getting actually used to that too was very difficult for me. So, being able to detach from the business side of it and from an emotional perspective, because I was emotional about a lot of the things that were happening because I wanted to be successful and I wanted to do a good job, but you fail all the time in commercial real estate, constantly. And there's a lot of rejection. So getting used to that was a big learning curve too.
But one of the biggest questions I get from people that are contemplating a change, change of industry or something like that, is that there's usually some objection around, well, I don't know what my transferable skills are. Because people think a lot of times I don't know real estate. I was just in, nonprofit orchestra and I don't know real estate. And obviously you had mentorship there to help you. But how did you think about bridging those gaps or making that transition? What you mentioned kind of this aptitude for sales going back into college.
Yeah.
How did you think about the actual transferable skills versus what you would just sort of learn on the job?
Yeah. I mean, look, a lot of people at the time would be like, do you want to do development or do you want to do brokerage? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know what brokerage is. I don't know what development is. I don't know what ownership is. And, but I think what most people could see about me was that I was pretty confident and I wasn't afraid to like make the call to get someone to meet with me. I wasn't afraid to follow up. I wasn't afraid to, speak to my talents. And so that's like, those are a lot of sales things, right? It's execution. And so a lot of the people that were in commercial real estate and, had been successful said, this is a sales job. And it's true. I mean, commercial real estate, unless you're like, doing the operations side of it or the construction side of it, it's all about sales because it's all about, cold calling and getting the business and then closing the business and selling the space or whatever. And so the people that I was meeting with, I think could see that I was, had a lot of the sales talents and techniques. And so I knew that would be transferable to commercial real estate. What I didn't realize, and again, like, I guess ignorance is bliss. A lot of my career was not knowing what it was going to be like, not knowing what commercial real estate was going to be like in terms of learning the technical aspects of it or the rejection of it was good because if I had known it, I probably wouldn't have done it. Right. So sometimes ignorance is bliss. And so
totally,
it was good that I had enough confidence to rip the Band-Aid and do it and join an all male sales team. But, it was definitely like, I used to call my brother and my dad and be like crying on the phone. I'd be like, this is so hard. And they would be like laughing, because they went through it and then eventually you learn it. My brother once said to me, he said, every 3 months in commercial real estate gets better. So I would wake up and be 3 months later. Okay, I know a little bit more. Then it was 6 months later. I knew a little bit more. 9 months later, a year later, 2 years later. And he was right. It just took time. It's all like an evolution in terms of learning this stuff. And you have to, a lot of times in I think in all jobs, but in commercial real estate, you learn through your failures. And so you have to be okay with getting back up and keep going. And so I had to learn that over time though.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Having that guidance or that mentorship to sort of reset your expectations on it is so interesting. Like I was listening to a podcast by a guy who I'm having on the show next month. But he was interviewing Alex Hormuzzi, who's an entrepreneur and content creator. And Alex was relaying a story about an successful billionaire friend of his who was trying to build more of like a personal brand. And he was like, putting out, I think it was like 10 or 12 pieces of content a week or something like that, and not really having traction, and asked Alex like how much he's putting out. And Alex was like, I don't know, it's like 3,500. And, the guy said, thank you for resetting my expectations. I'm like, what the minimum standard basically is. And so we need that from people, because if we're embarking on something new, we don't know what that expectation should be a lot of times. So it's super helpful to have somebody laughing in your face.
Totally.
and telling you this is par for the course. Buckle up.
Yeah. My dad would always be like, are you bleeding? And I'm like, no. He's like, all right, well, that's good. That across, but a lot of times, I used to say to my brother, like, am I being punked here? Like, what's happening? Like, is this real life that actually, but yeah, you have to set your expectations and then lower them and then lower them again. So, all right. So you start to really gain some hard skills in a particular avenue, commercial real estate, and you go on to kind of work with
a bigger outfit, CBRE, and do really well. So talk to me about like that transition and what were your goals there? What were you trying to get to in that phase of your life?
Well, that was like arguably the biggest rip the Band-Aid for me because I was living in Philadelphia. I was newly engaged, and my now husband really wanted to move to New York, and he was considering business school and he was considering banking, and I just at that point I'd sort of given up on the New York Big Apple dream. And I had gotten I had this huge network from the Philadelphia Orchestra. And then I had this huge network in commercial real estate. And, my dad at the time said, this is back to the whole theme of like, don't quit, was like, if you leave Philadelphia, you're committing professional suicide. And I was like, at that point, I chose, this partnership with my husband. And I didn't give up my career. It's just that we made a decision together about what was going to be best for both of our careers and kind of like what we wanted for the future. And so we decided to move to New York. And so I quit my job in Philadelphia, and then I had to get a new job in New York. And so that ripped the Band-Aid was like changing markets, because in commercial real estate, you're very market driven in most cases. And leaving Philadelphia, no one leaves. It's just like one of those places. And meanwhile, it's like 2 hours from New York. And so it's like really not that far. But so at that point, I had to sort of start the journey over again. I was lucky at that point that I had this base that I knew I wanted to stay in commercial real estate. And so I was able to start that journey. But then also what's interesting is like I talked about graduating college in 2001. I moved to New York in 2007, which was like pre the world, falling out from under everyone's feet in terms of going into a recession. And so that was an interesting time to be looking for a new job in the city. And I also went from ownership side, again, I don't know if it's going to make sense to anyone else, to the brokerage side, which is kind of a rare thing to do in commercial real estate. Usually you would go from brokerage to ownership, but it just made sense. And at that point, I had enough knowledge about things, right? So I knew I was good at sales. I knew I was very good at execution. That was like kind of my value add on other teams, meaning I'm very good at cradle to grave sales, like starting from the beginning, following all the steps to get it done. And so I knew that I wanted to find a team that I could trust. And I knew that I wanted to quickly learn the market as quickly as possible. And I knew I could add value from my skills in execution and my skills in sales. And then I knew the money would come if I did the other things right first. And so I then went, I met with a ton of people again in commercial real estate. And then I landed with this team that at that point, I could trust my instincts a little bit more in terms of who I wanted to work with. And I stayed with that team for 15 years at CBRE. And so that was definitely the right decision for me. And that's how I got to CBRE.
So I want to ask about the whole don't quit thing, because
I know
you and I talked about this before we started recording, but you didn't really reach this topic yet with the audience. So we were talking about how your father really had this mentality of you just never quit. Mine's the exact same way. Like we get totally trade stories about this.
Yeah.
So and you obviously just mentioned you're committing career suicide if you leave Philadelphia.
A little dramatic. Yeah.
So, but what was that conversation like? Because I think it's really scary for people who end up taking what other people perceive as a risk to communicate that to loved ones that want the best for you.
Totally.
But you yourself need to communicate in a way because you want them to get it and you want them to support you.
Yeah.
So how was that conversation with your father who says don't quit?
It was not good.
Really?
No, it took him a while eventually he, like when he saw sort of what I did with my career here and what my husband did with his career and the family that we built, he was, very complimentary, but that took a really long time. And I mean, on my dad's funeral, book at his funeral, it said that the poem "Don't You Quit" is on there, like literally. And so, it was definitely like a strained time because I was doing really well in my career. And I think that he was proud of me for that. But he was like, why are you going to start all over again? And I think because he never really had anyone helping him and he sort of did everything on his own. And so that was his way of, I think, helping me by he's saying, don't start all over again. Why are you going to torture yourself type thing?
Yeah.
But he also was a big believer in like the partnerships that you have outside of work and the support that you get from those people. And so I had that in the back of my head too. And so I was like, I was choosing this. I did not choose my partnership over my career, but we were choosing to do things together, and my husband and I, in terms of what we wanted to do. It wasn't him over me or vice versa. And so I trusted my instincts that moving to New York was the right thing, even though everyone in my family was really pushing against it. So
it's hard. It's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
But what I kind of learned from that whole mentality or having those experiences as well, they mean well for you. They are taking their life lessons. They're taking their life lessons that they've experienced viscerally. Yeah. And they're just projecting them forward and, onto you to say like, hey, don't make these mistakes that I made, but you're on a different path.
Yeah, I know.
So
hard.
It's so tough. It's so tough to communicate that often, but you're on a different path. So not all the rules apply.
So then what I did do when I got to New York was find anyone I could talk to in New York. Right.
Yes.
And so it's not that I was like leaving my dad's advice behind, because when I finally took the job at CBRE, I definitely consulted with him on it,
Right.
But I was able to find some mentors here who are still mentors. They're still really big mentors to me that helped me to make that next choice too.
Yeah. So you work up to essentially, what is it here? EVP in the Advisory and Transaction Service Group at CBRE over a 15-year period with them in New York. Doing well, raising a family, having kids, being the mom, and doing all of those types of things that are in addition, above and beyond the let's kill it at work. So for our audience, Patrice has 4 kids. I have 3. I can't imagine 4. So talk to us about this then, like emotional evolution, or I don't know how you want to describe it. If it was like your purpose being pulled in a different direction because of some of your experiences, just talk to us about maybe the transformation of how you viewed what you wanted to work on, because you go start a company from a successful, great life in real estate.
Yeah, because really with getting married and having 4 kids and living in the city and then moving to the suburbs, like all of this extra noise that was happening outside of my job. The one thing that was constant, I say this to working moms all the time, sometimes the one thing that's constant is your job, right? Like, as I learned to deal with toddlers and childcare and all of these other things that you never have to deal with in your whole entire life, at least I could walk into my office and kind of knew the drill in terms of what to do, right? And so that was a constant, but layered in so many other different things. And, I mostly represented landlords in Manhattan. I worked on a great team. I worked on some really cool transactions. New York City commercial real estate is really exciting. I worked with some awesome owners, awesome tenants, and, it was a really exciting job. It's a high paying job too. And so there's a lot of like hook there. That's hard to walk away from. But at the same time, I had these 4 kids, right? And I became obsessed as a working parent around efficiency, because the way you make the life of the working parent work is make it more efficient. And as I was becoming obsessed with like packing your lunch versus catching the earlier train versus getting to this dentist appointment on time or whatever, I also breastfed all of my children, right? And when I first came back to work in early 2010, after having my first child, I was given 12 weeks maternity leave, which at the time was the norm. And there was no laws in place for providing private pumping space for moms. And so I asked my HR director where I should pump breast milk because I needed to pump because I was still breastfeeding. And, Fortune 100 company, they said you should pump in the bathroom. And so I was pumping breast milk in the bathroom for my son, which is super unhygienic, awful. And I made it 2 days pumping at work. And what happens if if you don't pump, your milk supply goes away. So I was literally forced to stop breastfeeding. But at that time, like I could sit in a room and we could spend a whole nother podcast talking about women in the workforce and retention and resignation and advancement of women. And I have so much to say on that. Obviously, I'm, a woman. My whole mission in life now is for working moms. But, at that time, I could sit in a room and negotiate with like 13 men on a deal, but I didn't feel like brave enough because even back then it was like to say, hey, can you just give me like a private separate pumping space to do this? And so I just quit. I quit the breastfeeding and I just went on with my life. And fast forward to my other 3 kids, there was laws in place, but I still had to walk up 3 flights of stairs through a whole bullpen of men just to get to the room to realize I forgot one part. If you forget one part, it doesn't actually work and it becomes a whole domino effect of terribleness. And so in all of those years, I was also advising all of my architect friends, all of my furniture vendors, owners, brokers, everyone about ways to build out appropriate wellness spaces so that women could be efficient with their pumping. And I was like, why isn't there a better way to do this? Which is essentially how I came up with the MilkMate, which is what I'm doing now. But I simmered and thought on the MilkMate for a few years before I ripped that. That was whatever. Every brand name was hard to rip, but to take that step to do it, it took me a lot of thinking.
So I want to unpack this a little bit. I think this is really important. So number one, I don't want to skip over.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
The pain points.
Oh yes, of
pumping in the workplace, right? So can you, for our audience who maybe are guys and have no idea what this is like, or women who have not gotten to this stage in life yet, describe like how many times a day this needs to happen, the equipment, because this is a huge deal. My wife breastfed all 3 of our kids. She's a doctor. She would be at the hospital.
Oh, it's horrible for doctors.
She'd be like, I'm doing notes and I've got these things attached to me and I feel like a machine. And it's terrible. So I want people to understand that part of it.
I mean, look, it's funny because we have to kind of explain what happens behind closed doors a lot of times. Right. People don't really understand the setup at home, the setup at work, the breakdown at work, the breakdown at home. And so, men ask me all the time what it's like to pump at work. I'm like, why don't you pack up your coffee maker in the morning, put it in a duffel bag, bring it to work with you, walk down the hallway, go into a small little closet, take your clothes off, set up the coffee maker with all the pieces and parts, brew the coffee. But if you forget the filter or the coffee beans, you can't actually brew the coffee. And then if you don't brew the coffee, you're going to start leaking coffee from your nipples. And then, by the way, brew 2 or 3 more times throughout the rest of the day. Pack up the coffee maker and the coffee in a thermos, bring that all home with you, wash all the parts and do it all over again the next day and wash all those parts. So that's literally what it's like for most people. Like there's circumstances where it's better, but it's packing up the pump. It's packing up all the parts that come with you and putting them all together and washing them in between each use. And, there are a lot of inefficient things I do as a working parent, but that was by far the most inefficient. And, we're looking to save women 45 minutes to an hour a day in terms of the process and which, equates to 23 work days a year and gives them more time at home with their family, more time to grab coffee with a friend, more time to do a workout, more time to sleep for 20 more minutes, all of these things that add up to make things work. And, for me, if you take it back to when I was working 15-hour days in commercial real estate with 4 kids at home, like I was struggling all the time. I was drowning and I have everything in my corner. I have a great partner. I have 4 healthy kids. I have, good childcare. I had a great team that I worked with. I had, a good financial situation and I was drowning. And if I can't make it work, what about the people that are single parents or have a sick parent themselves or or have a sick child? There's so many other things that go into it. If I can't make it work, what about all those people and how, they can't make it work? And so I just became obsessed with efficient processes across the board for people that really need to work and want to work. And, my mission is to empower women, but my mission is to improve efficiencies really too. So, and it's hard for people to understand how hard it is to pump at work, how hard it is to breastfeed in general. Cause I'm not anti-form. I'm just pro mom. I'm pro whatever works for the mom. So
Right. And so so this is problem identification, like 101, right? For entrepreneurs, which is,
Totally.
you had a very visceral experience with the problem, but then there's all these offshoot problems, which is just the everyday like anxiety of, do I have everything? What if I spill something while I'm at work on my
What if I forget a piece? Yeah.
Yeah. Like what if I'm leaking in the middle of a meeting? Like there's all of these just anxiety offshoots too, there's something in the back of your mind, like, hey, this gotta be a better way. Gotta be a better way.
Totally. Like you can fly to the moon, but you can't do this. Like, I don't get it. Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, I'm curious how long it took you. How long were you sitting with this problem? It was years.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, right.
This is normal too.
Yeah. So there's like, okay, there's a problem that needs to be solved. And why are you the unique person to solve it? Right. Right. And so first of all, I did it for, 3 years with my 3 younger kids. And then I would be obsessed, like, God, I just wish everything was here. I wish the parts were clean. I wish they were assembled. I was like, always just like thinking about that.
Yeah.
And then I had a lot of like sort of post-traumatic moments in terms of like the rooms that I was doing it in, or like forgetting a part and then being late for a meeting. And there was like all of this noise around it. But then I became the loudest person in the room on my team whenever this subject came up, right? Because a lot of times people don't want to talk about it because they don't want to talk about breastfeeding or breasts or like what happens in the pumping room. And so as my owners were designing space, or my tenants were designing space, or my architects were designing space, people that, and its regulations began to change and return to work in it, there was so much that was happening. It was happening over and over again that I was the loudest person in the room and the smartest person in the room as it pertained to best practices for wellness rooms at work.
Okay.
And I definitely had like a light bulb moment around it and was like, oh my God, like, wait, we could do this. And this is why, I know all about commercial real estate from a price perspective, from a construction perspective. So I'm kind of the right person to do this. And I remember I like called my husband on a business trip and told him about the idea. And then he was excited about it. But then we didn't do anything for a while after that.
All right.
Telling
We're not going to gloss over this light bulb moment. These are the break moments. Okay.
Oh,
These are the break moments. So what transpired that set off that light bulb? Can you take us, do you know the moment? Like what was going on at the time? How did it pop into you that you were the right person, that we could do this? And start there. And then I want to ask specifically about your call to your husband and what that was.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, there was the years and years and years of pumping where I was like, God, why can't there be, I do this? I don't get it. And I think other things too, that were like going into my mind around like efficiency or helping women in the workplace specifically. And, but I think there was like 3 meetings in a row that happened where we were designing a wellness space because by code, it had to be within the space, and everything that everyone else wanted to do in the room was wrong. It was like the worst place possible they wanted to put it. And it was it wasn't even in line with code. And it was like a room full of people, right? Like who like were supposed to be experts in this, and they were wrong. And then when I explained it to them, they were like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, no, you're right. This is how we should do it. And then we were building out amenities centers at some of our buildings, and we went on a tour of other amenities centers, right? And like some wellness rooms were built out there, but again, they weren't really built in a comfortable way or in the right way, I thought. And so it just started to add up in terms of the idea of how it should be done. And after one of these meetings, I was just like, that's when I had the light bulb moment. Like, why can't there be a service that provides the strongest possible pump with the parts ready to go? And what I visualize that to be in terms of what it is now is very different.
Sure.
But my husband will be like, I was in San Francisco when you called me. I remember when you called me, and I told him my idea, and he was like, yeah, because he also was there with me, like he used to be like, I'm going to like light these parts on fire. I can't stand watching them anymore. I'm like, oh, you can't stand it. Like, you can't stand me pumping at work. If you can't stand it, then like, how do you think I can stand it? Do you know what I mean? So that was, and look, there's a lot of driving factors around why people pump at work, and we can get into that too. But that was my light bulb moment. But we didn't do anything for a while. We talked about it for a long time after that, and we didn't tell anyone for like 3 years probably.
So you called him. He was in San Francisco. He's on like a work trip.
Yeah.
You just had to call him. Like you were excited. Like how? Like what was it like?
Yes.
I want to know what it felt like.
Yeah, there was like a couple times before that I had been in meetings with entrepreneurs, and like I was just like, wait, why are like they're doing this? So like, I was sort of, I guess, jealous of them in a way because so I think that maybe I was like thinking about some sort of thing that I wanted to do. But when it came to me, it was just like, I didn't know what it was going to look like. I'm looking at my product right now. But I knew that the idea around it was right. And I knew that just from my own personal experience that it would change the life of a lot of working moms. And so in terms of respecting their time, retention, regulate, I was very involved with the Women's Network, and the biggest issue is retention and advancement of women. And I knew that this was a tangible tool that could really help women, like not just the idea of something. Because a lot of times, and this is a struggle I think that a lot of women have, it's like, okay, get some coaching, get some like mentorship, get this. And it's like, as you become a working mom who's focused first on their family and then next on their profession or other things, you become last on the totem pole. And this was an actual tool that I knew could like really help a working mom. So I was excited about it. And my husband agreed like right away. So that's why I think that it was, because he's, thinks of things differently than I do. So it was good to know that we were like completely on the same page with the idea that this was a good idea.
Okay. So it's a good idea. And it's that feeling of a good idea. It's not, the numbers pencil out at this point. We just feel it in our bones. There is there's an alignment here. So I want to go to then actually getting up the courage to take the step. Yeah. And to leave. How did you set up? How did you create that transition from I am a real estate executive to I'm doing this thing full time? Was it a side hustle? How did you do this?
Okay, so we talked about it for a really long time, right? This was just my husband and I. He was really the only person that I shared this stuff with. And then it was a point in my career. It was 2019 was like an epic commercial real estate year it was an epic market for everyone. This is pre-COVID. No one knew what was on the horizon at that point. And if you looked at me on paper in terms of what was happening professionally, it was like home run, right? Yeah. Like awesome clients, doing well financially, great, had gotten promoted to EVP, all of these things that were great. And I was drowning, miserable. And like, because I was, being pulled in one direction at work and being pulled in another direction at home. And I wanted to be in both places. Because a lot of times people say to me, or people used to say to me, when are you going to be able to stop working? And I'm like, well, I need to work, but I also want to work. So there's like this whole, idea around that. And so I got to a point where and also to my husband's credit, he was very much like, you should go do this because, I want you to be happy. And that was giving up a lot for him too, because we were really equal bread sharers. And so it was going to be a sacrifice for him too. But I got to the point at the end of 2019 where I was like, I can't actually live like this anymore, right? I can't be pulled in this many directions because I'm missing things because I also don't like things to fall through the cracks, and everything was cracks. I don't like them to fall through the cracks at home, and I don't like them to fall through the cracks at work. And it was literally impossible for that not to happen because I was doing too much. And so I made the decision to go back in early 2020 and just say, I need a break. Right. Mm-hmm. And so my team was awesome. I just said, I need to take a sabbatical because I'm on path A right now, and path A is not sustainable. I'm going to crash. I'm going to burn. And so what is sustainable? I don't really know. I need to take a breath here. And so I made that decision in early 2020. And it's crazy because it took me a few months to unwind things. And I technically went on my sabbatical on March 6th, 2020. And then the whole world shut down a week later.
Yeah.
So that was, and then I became a stay-at-home mom teacher at that point, right? Because all my kids were doing homeschool. And so, but it did give me the window. I was still doing some work in commercial real estate. It did give me the window to start doing research around my idea. Before even if I wanted to do the side hustle, I would Google things on the train and be like, oh, what happens at work? Let me look at wellness rooms, all this kind of stuff. And then I was like obsessing over it when I would sign new leases, but I wasn't able to really dig into it until 2020, until I had this like moment to do it.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. There's this idea that like you have to create space to be able to really think about something different. It's impossible to do any level of depth when you're burning at two ends, and now you're going to burn at three ends because you got family, you got your job, and then now you're trying to think about doing something else. So we always we coach people around like how do you gain space within your job, right? Like how do you create some separation so you at least have, let's say, 5-10 hours a week, some target where you're like, okay, I've got this blocked off and focused. I can disconnect and I can start to look at creatively what are my other options. So your idea, your solution was actually like kind of take a sabbatical, which you were fortunate to be able to do.
I was fortunate from a financial perspective to be able to do that. Like people ask me all the time, like, would you wish you started this 20 years ago versus now? I'm like, look, I worked really hard to get to the point where I could do this from a financial perspective, but I don't necessarily have the same amount of energy that I had 20 years ago. So I have to like sort of, it's a balance on that side too. But yes, I was fortunate enough that I was able to take that breath. But I also didn't realize, and I think you talk to a lot of people about this now post-COVID, I did not realize what that, like the slug out commute, 15-hour day was doing to my body and to my mental capacity until I stopped doing it. And so until, a lot of times when I mentor other people that are looking to make a change, sometimes I say, like, don't do what I did. Like, but that's hard. Like most people that I've talked to that are working moms, like they don't stop what they're doing because they know that they can't stop a lot of times. And so forcing yourself to is again, getting advice from other people to help you do it too.
Yeah. So then this idea that like you realized you needed to change something, you needed to sort of redesign your life. And so that led to the sabbatical, and gave you some space to like explore MilkMate. Yeah. But what I know about my trials and tribulations in entrepreneurship, my question for you is like, how is creating a company the answer to like your balanced lifestyle? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's not. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Well, no. It takes a while to ramp up. So you do have this like sort of room, which also is a little bit hard for me because I was so used to like being so busy. And so like doing, 3 things a day as opposed to 500 things a day for work. But if I guess sometimes not knowing exactly how to do things is not the worst thing, because if I had known that I was going to have to get hardware manufactured abroad and here that has to get approved by the FDA and installed and serviced and build a team around it, I probably would not be sitting here today. So the idea that, I guess my advice for people is like, if you really believe that you have a good idea and you believe that you're the right person to do it just based on your own experiences, then you should just do it because, if you start to overanalyze the process that's going to take to get there, then you probably won't do it.
Yeah. It's that idea that like we all think that the more information we have, the better. But to your point earlier, it's we've this is actually like sort of proven beyond like a certain number of pieces of information, it's actually detrimental. So the idea is actually that there is some power and knowledge and good things in ignorance. And so
I couldn't agree more.
So the question is like, how do you get to the point where you have the greatest odds that you can succeed? And it's really what you hit on. It's really like you have, it's so much more illogical and it's more emotional than anything. It's, do you have a feeling in your bones that this is a good idea? Do you have reason to believe that you are the right person or as good as anybody
correct
to do this thing? And can you see yourself doing it for a long time and overcoming challenge? Like that's it.
Totally.
And then you just go do it.
Yeah. That might take you a while to get to that point,
right.
But
it does.
A lot of what we're talking about is like taking these steps and then gaining some experience. With that experience, you can take the next step. With that experience, you can take the next step. And so I think it takes a lot of patience, right, to get through that. I'm not a very patient person, but it takes a lot of patience to get through that process, to make that jumping decision.
Yeah, it's more, and I think the patience actually is more related to just getting your courage up to do it, like and mentally, because the pieces of information are just there. It's less than you think it is, but then it's like can I do this?
Right.
I think I can. Little children's story. So that's where like all of the doubt and the wasted time and that kind of, I guess, masquerades as patience. I feel like that's what we all really, really struggle with.
Totally. I really struggled with that a lot.
Yeah. So, talk to us about, so we've obviously, you've described MilkMate a little bit. You've described the problem really well. Give us your sort of pitch for MilkMate.
Yeah.
Like what specifically is it? What are you guys doing? What markets are you in? Where are you at with, I'm super interested like with where you're at with traction and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So we are a turnkey breast pumping solution specifically designed for the workplace. And so what that means is that most importantly, we include a hospital grade multi-user pump that is safe for many users to use. It's been cleared by the FDA. And the most innovative part of our pump is that our parts come pre-assembled, pre-sterilized, ready for immediate use, so that when the woman comes to work, she brings absolutely nothing with her at all in order to pump. And this is a wellness amenity paid for by the employer. What has evolved over time is that, originally we thought it would be the pump and the parts that are ready for immediate use. What we found out over time after doing a ton of research with, real estate stakeholders, facilities, HR, benefits providers, is that most people wanted to know the right way to do this. And so when we say a turnkey solution, it means that we provide anything that is necessary to make this wellness room work most efficiently as a pumping space. So we include the furniture, so storage for the parts, a fridge if necessary, an appropriate chair for pumping, a cart with our pump, and then all of the parts. And we also include a bunch of software that's associated with it so that we can manage the inventory. And we are a service. And so we call ourselves BPAS, breast pumping as a service. We consult the employer, doesn't matter who they are, what size they are, what their real estate looks like. We then choose the right installation for them. We install, we onboard the people that are going to be using it and the people that are buying it. And then we service it over time. So we do not walk away. We are partners in helping with this whole process. And we believe that we are making the life of the user a lot easier, but also we are a retention tool, a return to work tool, a regulation tool. And so, that's it. We're the turnkey breast pumping solution for the work.
And so you're selling this into
employers.
Companies. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Where you started in New York City? Where are you now? How is the like growth being managed?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're headquartered in New York. We decided to attack the New York market first because that's, all of my experience in commercial real estate. All of my
Sure.
network is in commercial real estate here in New York. That being said, we just installed in San Francisco this week. We have a lot of new installations that are going to be happening in Philadelphia. Talking to a lot of people in Boston. New York is our main focus because we are here, boots on the ground. When I started the company, I had a lot of consultants helping me to build it. So doing the research, the development, the engineering, the FDA, the manufacturing consultants. We now have our full-time employees here in New York. We had to close a fundraise and get FDA approval before we could start selling. And so that all happened. We closed our fundraise in December 22. We got FDA clearance in March of 23. And we've been piloting that's a big advice I give entrepreneurs is test it out and figure out the best way to do it. Which is why I say the evolution of the product is real. And then now we are fully selling. And I would say we're mostly selling in New York right now.
Okay. So what I'm super interested in, but I'm going to skip because it's for more of an entrepreneurial podcast is I want everybody to understand like the idea of starting a company that is hardware specific. Like you have so many moving parts. So it's not like she just had this idea and now magically she has a company. Like there are so many hurdles, bumps, forks in the road, decisions, adversity that you have probably faced because I knew I've met the founder of Ring, the video doorbell cameras, and he's got so many amazing stories.
I know
about like going to China and trying to work with like pulling his hair out. About
it's like Shoe Dog too. Yeah,
exactly. So I want people to understand like it's not just a fairy tale. Like there's a lot that we're skipping here, and you got to be able to. You've manufactured your brake. You've created a different life for yourself, but it doesn't stop there. It continues. You trade one pain for another, basically, when you choose entrepreneurship.
Yeah, right. It's true. I mean, look, I could probably go back to commercial real estate and jump right back in and be okay with it just because I did it for so many years. It like there's no fun in fundraising. Like hardware manufactured is hard. Like there's a lot. I will say that the rejection that I experienced in commercial real estate, which was like not personal, just business, definitely helped me because, and naysayers, like I guess my dad even being a naysayer when I moved to New York, right? It was like, it's sometimes you have to just follow your instincts and your gut. And it's surprising because sometimes when you start to do things, like you're like, oh, like, does anyone really know what they're doing? I don't know.
Yeah. No, I don't think they do.
You have to like Google what you're doing and you have to find experts on the subject. And so I just tried to surround myself by people that were experts in the different aspects of what I was trying to do. So experts in the FDA perspective, experts from an engineering perspective, experts from like a warehousing and 3PL perspective. And, then I take their advice very seriously when I make decisions around things. And so I don't even know if that answers your question. Yeah, you have to do a lot of rejection when you do the change. But, I guess if you've gotten to the point, it's like trust your instincts around it.
All right. I'm going to close this out with a few rapid fire questions. Okay. But what a great story. I feel like I love these transformation stories. They get me so jacked up. When I hear people that have just made these pivots and voluntarily chosen to do some hard things and see what happens. So I just get really fired up about it. And I love this story. So here's some rapid fire questions for you. A little maybe helpful stuff for the audience. Is there a recent author, thought leader, or influencer that you've come across that has really caught your attention that people should know about?
I just said Shoe Dog. I love Shoe Dog about Phil Knight and the founding of Nike. Because that is like so many stumbles along the way and is really an evolution. And so I love that book.
Great. So we got a book recommendation, but what about, is there a book that you're reading now or have read recently that has had the most influence on your trajectory or path?
Yeah, I think I recently read Burn Rate which is written by the founder of Bonobos. And it's a lot about managing his mental health and also growing a company at the same time. And so I think that speaks a lot to like what's happening in your personal life and what's happening in your professional life. And he did a really good job of showing the breaks in his sort of evolution of his career, but then also layering in what was happening on a personal side. So sometimes business books are all about the business, right? And I think it's important to layer in both. And so I really love that book, Burn Rate.
I haven't heard of that one. I'm going to check it out because when I talk about coaching people who want to do something completely different, we talk about burn rate from the standpoint of like, obviously cash management and how can you fund something, to do something else and that. But the idea that like the best path for you to be on is one that you can sustain, right? Like the best plan is one you can sustain. So that goes into like your mental and physical health as well.
There's a lot about mental health. And like it says burn rate, starting a company and losing my mind. And I thought, oh, you go crazy. But it's a very honest portrayal of his struggles with mental illness. And so it was a great book, but it also talked about the steps along the way to building a company. And so it was really good. I will also say that like I'm a huge fan of Reese Witherspoon because she has pivoted her whole career from acting into creating Hello Sunshine, this company that is really focused on, creating content that is made by women for women and helping to change how the story is written. And I feel very mission aligned with her, and her business goes far outside of just, production and content. And so she's definitely been a huge inspiration to me too.
Excellent. From all your experience so far, do you have one piece of advice for someone that's just getting started, in the job market, in their career?
It's an evolution, not a revolution. Takes time. Gain the experiences to make the decisions, right? Like I was able to trust my instinct on moving to New York, my instinct on starting MilkMate, because I spent a lot of time gaining the experience to be able to trust my instincts. So sometimes it takes time. Excellent.
And we always get we have a lot of negativity in the world right now, recession, maybe a lot of bickering, but what's something that's got you really excited about the next 12 months?
I'm excited because I'm talking to a lot of employers who are like really want to get involved in the movement of creating a better workplace for all of their employees, and a lot of DEI initiatives. And I'm pleasantly surprised by that. And so I'm excited for the evolution of the workplace for everyone, not just working parents.
All right. Last one that I didn't give you ahead of time. Did you learn anything about yourself from our conversation today? And if so, what was it?
Probably that I'm like too long-winded. I have to be more focused on my answers on things. But a lot of the things about your career it's a lot of self-evaluation. That's hard to do, I think. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. I'm going to give you the chance. If I was a terrible host and didn't ask you something or glossed over something, I'm going to give you the floor to talk about anything you want. If I missed something, if there's anything else that you want to leave our audience with.
No, I mean, look, I could spend all day talking about like the trials and tribulations and the being a working parent. And what I would say is that I think that all parents are working parents, whether they're working in the home or working outside the home. And I talked a lot about my dad, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was a hard worker because she supported a lot of different people. And so I would say we're all kind of should be in it together, and ask people for advice and trust the process.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Last one is just where can people find you online, learn more about you, follow your journey? Where can they find you?
So milkmate.com is our website. Our Instagram handle is at MilkMate Inc. And we're on LinkedIn as well. And that has all the information, and you can reach out to us there.
Excellent. We will make sure we have all of those links in our show notes when we set the episode out, along with descriptions of what we talked about today, so people
Right.
can get in and dive into the episode. Patrice, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I felt like it was a really good one. I learned a lot, and I think our audience did as well. So thank you for being
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything you said too. I learned a lot here too. Thank you.
Awesome.